Okay, so we're going to kick off with Wednesday's Serial with his question. Oh no, wait a minute. He was a little bit greedy and asked 4 questions. Okay, I didn't put a limit on it. Here goes. His first question was, what books are you enjoying in trade you don't normally talk about? It's quite strange because I did used to buy a lot of trades. Obviously you can't collect everything and you have to make cuts somewhere on books that you do actually love, or decide, no, I can't pick up another new issue, I'll wait till the trade comes out. And I haven't really been doing that much of late. I think it's a lot to do with the fact that I'm still getting that Ultimate graphic novel collection, and that was giving me my kind of trade treat every other week, where I could just sit down with the book and read a whole story in one sitting. However, there are still a few trades out there that I pick up from time to time when I can afford it. I've just picked out 4 really here that are kind of really doing it for me at the moment. FBP from Vertigo. To be honest, if I had read this in singles, read the first issue, I would have gone, no, not for me, I'm not going to pick this up again. So it was fortunate that I picked this up in trade. I'd heard really good things about it from all you guys out there, and it came out really cheaply. It was only about £7 over here, which is really cheap for a trade. And like I said, the first issue just didn't hit me, and I thought, well, I've bought it now, I'll keep on going with it. But fortunately, this turned into be quite an interesting read. There's a lot of kind of science fiction language gubbins going around, and there's a lot of mystery in there as well. A little bit Matrixy at times, but really enjoyed it. Terry Moore's Rachel Rising. This is from Abstract Studios. It's a really good book. If you like revival, it's got a kind of flavour of that, only it's not so much a whole everybody who was dead is now alive. It's people who get killed or die unexpectedly that suddenly seem to come back. There's lots of kind of supernatural, witchcrafty, cult type stuff going on in there. You've definitely got kind of like your evil characters, your good characters, and it's all written by the great Terry Moore, and drawn by him too. I'm only on volume 3 at the moment. I think there's another one out by now, and I'll be looking for that when I have the money. Another fantastic book, Prophet from Image. It's Brandon Graham. I fell in love with Brandon Graham's work after I read King City, which was just so much fun, so imaginative. Those of you who've heard me talk about Multiple Warheads, also just a fantastic book by Brandon Graham. And then I saw the first volume of this in a sale, and I thought, right, I'm grabbing it, I'm picking it up, and it's just bizarre. It is this kind of future world that's at war, and there is almost a cohesive narrative running through it all, but it's typical Brandon Graham's crazy imagination that just literally, I swear, he's on drugs. That's the only answer I can give to how creative and imaginative this guy is, but fantastic. I'm sure he's kind of angling for me to mention this, so I will. It is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I never quite got the whole hype with these characters back in the 80s. This is the first time I've ever read this read these characters in a comic book form. Yes, there was the cartoons, there was the dodgy films, there was an even dodgier TV series, and I just didn't get it. I didn't understand, as I don't know even how old I was at the time, but I just didn't get the hype, why everyone was so excited about these turtles. And of course, because it was over here in the UK, we couldn't use the word ninja, so they changed it for heroes, Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles. That's it. They had to change it all because there was some bad connotations to ninja and showing cartoons the word ninja in it. It's the UK, they're very sensitive. But I love this. I love this kind of reimagining, I guess, of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and thank you to Matt for sending me the very first volume and getting me hooked on it. So that was his first question. His second question was, what do you think of the Fables game? I presume he's talking about the video game. I haven't played it. Can you get it for the Xbox 360, I asked. He also asked, are you getting the Fables bookends? If anyone out there wants to buy me them, I'd be quite happy to take them off your hands. I don't have them. I'm not really going out there to buy them. I obviously buy Fables in single issues and not those really nice hardback, are they oversized? I think they are oversized deluxe editions that are for the purpose of these bookcase endings. So no. And finally, who is your least favourite comic book character? Haven't we been over this? I'm sure I've answered this a zillion times. Cyclops. It's always Cyclops. He is the worst comic book character that has ever existed. There was a running joke with me and Custom Bromstar for ages that said that he is still a Skrull. He cannot be that douchey and not be a Skrull. And there are your answers, Matt. Next up, I was hit with 2 questions from my good buddy Custom Bromstar, Scott. First question was, who would you like to see play Death and Dream if they ever made a Sandman movie? Now, I have to say right off the bat, I hope this never happens. I hope they never make a movie. I don't want them to make a TV series. I don't want this to happen. And this may sound strange coming from me because it is my all-time favourite run of comics of all time. I will reread this until the day I die. I love it that much. From the very first page that I read of a Sandman graphic novel, I was hooked. I was entranced. I couldn't get enough. So this question was particularly tough for me to answer, but it's for you, Scott, so I will do my best. Now I'm going to start with Dream, and I don't know. Okay. I did think at first, and it would have to be a younger version. He couldn't play this character now. And as long as he didn't kind of ham it up like he did in all the horror films he was in, I could see Christopher Lee having played Dream. When I was thinking about actors, I was also thinking about if this movie was ever made, and who would direct this, and my mind immediately went to someone like Tim Burton because of the quirky nature that goes along the way of the book. So I thought, well, who's he used before? Who does he always go to? Johnny Depp. So that's another one I thought of. And then finally, I think I was just going down a list because my mind just went blank, because obviously as soon as you try and start thinking of actors' names, your mind goes blank. So I just looked down a list with photographs next to it of like the top 100 actors. And I saw this face and I thought, it's different, it's an odd choice, but maybe it could work. And I thought maybe Kevin Bacon? Anyway, let's move on to Death, which again was another tough one to cast. I'd be terrible as a casting agent, I really would. So again I thought, right, let's think of someone you would never even imagine taking the role. And again, I was going down one of those lists of top 100 actresses, and I just looked at it and went, maybe. And I thought, Juliette Binoche. Then again, I went the whole Tim Burton line. Who else has he worked with? Who's kind of kooky, could pull off all the kind of goth trappings? Helena Bonham Carter. I think again, those two, although they are gorgeous and they are wonderful actresses, maybe a bit too old for the role now. It would have to be kind of younger versions for them. But then, so we go on to younger actresses. This one I thought of, she's got kind of that comic book movie background already. Maybe Anna Paquin. And then I thought, what about even younger, though maybe able to pull it off? She's done a lot of independent movies after doing the big blockbuster movies that were Harry Potter. So it's shown that she can kind of tone down and play more independent type characters. I thought Emma Watson. Okay, that's all I've got for you. I don't know what else to say. It was difficult to make those choices. Like I said, the Dream and Death are such unique characters, and the way they are portrayed, it's so much more difficult to take a face that you are very familiar with from like a movie screen and kind of, would they fit into a comic book panel, so to speak. But there you go. He also asked me to pitch a great Elseworlds tale. God, this was tough. For those of you who aren't aware or not sure what an Elseworld tale is, this was a kind of storytelling device where you would take a character, usually a very well-known one, and that was in current continuity, take them out of that continuity and throw them into an era or a scenario that you wouldn't normally see them in. An example of this would be something like Marvel's 1602, where you had all these kind of the main Marvel characters living in Elizabethan times. And I have to say, I was stumped, because there have been loads of Elseworld tales, and every time I thought of one, I thought, that's been done, that's sort of been done. So I kind of cheated a little. And I've done one that's kind of pre-existing, but I just wanted it to extend a little. This is pre-New 52, so if you're new readers you might not know about this, but there was a time where we all thought Batman was dead. But apparently he'd been thrown back in time, and we had a 6-issue miniseries called The Return of Bruce Wayne, and every issue that they went through was Batman instilling that kind of time era that we're in. And right at the beginning they gave us basically caveman Batman, and I loved it. I thought, what a great idea. What if this kind of Batman persona lived in like, the Stone Age, and he had all his rogues villains, but they were kind of like of a caveman style, and although very conveniently after every issue he got transported to the next time era, what would have happened if he just got stuck in this kind of caveman era? So you could have had kind of Riddler as this cryptic shaman villain. You could have had Clayface, coming out of some sort of kind of volcanic molten lava and being constructed of that rather than, I don't know, clay. What else? Catwoman could be from another tribe that were all kind of like worshipping some sort of cat god. The kind of the permutations are just kind of unlimited. And so, sorry Scott, that's my Elseworlds tale. Fozzie Wozzie 1203 asked a very specific question, and it's quite long, it's quite descriptive, so bear with me a second, but this is what he asked. Okay, it's the morning of a comic convention, you're so looking forward to it. You're going to meet your favourite writers and artists, pick up some issues to fill gaps in your collection, but oh no! You forgot to get dressed in the morning. What a catastrophe. However, there is a nice lady who takes you to one side and she says you can borrow one of her costumes as she brought a spare. Only problem is they're one size too small for you. You have a choice between any female superhero costume. Which is one size too small? Which do you wear? Thanks, Patrick. Thanks for that. Well, I'm about to give you nightmares. How would you fancy seeing me in this? Remember, it's one size too small. Mwah, ah, 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 ah. Pleasant dreams. So, Jess S. asked, what, if anything, would make you give up comics? Would you buy comics even if you had to give up other necessities? If so, where is your line? Well, I did give up comics. I gave them up for a whole year. And that's because I got a bit stupid and got myself into lots of debt. And I had to say, look, this is stupid. I am spending X amount on comic books a month, and yet I can't even afford to pay the minimum payment on a credit card. It was stupid, and this is just like a warning. I am the person you don't want to turn into and get yourself into lots and lots of debt, because I'm going to say the unthinkable. They are only comic books. So yes, I've already given them up once, and I do think you have to eat, you have to put a roof over your head, you have to be warm in your house. None of these things will comic books provide. Sleepy Reader 666 posed a couple of questions for me. The first one being, in your real life, do you have any friends who are into comics? Not really, unless you class my comic book guy who sells me the comics a friend. Obviously I'll talk to him for a while over a cup of coffee in the shop. Funnily enough, somehow, because I don't really let anyone at work know about this channel, but someone did find out about it, and obviously it kind of spread around a little, and they all wanted to know about it, which I thought was quite nice. And so I did bring in kind of a small stack of comics for them to have a look at, and they ranged from all kind of years, going back to, like, I gave them some Kirby stuff to look at, gave them some Batman to look at, oh, just all sorts, Marvel, DC, the whole lot, just to show that, you know, comics are these like silly little like picture books, and that they are now actually quite serious and well written, and, you know, the art in it, you know, is phenomenal. So that was quite nice, but I don't really have anyone. The people I know are more into like the films and the TV, the superheroes, you know, the comics they are based on. He also asked, is your significant other into comics? Absolutely not. If you were single, would a person into comics be more of a potential romantic interest than one who wasn't? No. Given my significant other doesn't like comics, won't read any of mine, won't buy any. They buy them for me, but they won't read them. Next question came from Adam Hollander. Have you read DC Comics The New Frontier by Darwin Cook? If so, did you enjoy it? What are your thoughts on it? Have you read more of Darwin Cook's work? I haven't read it. I've seen the animated movie, but I haven't read the book. It's one of those things that I keep meaning to do, but kind of never get round to it. Darwin Cook, I've probably read bits and bobs here and there, but the last kind of big thing I guess I read of his was one of his latest Parker book, Slay Ground. I actually hadn't read any of his earlier books in these, though I hear they're just brilliant. My comic book guy, when I picked this up to buy, he did say it's not as good as his previous ones. But obviously I had no frame of reference, having not read the others, and I really enjoyed it. I love the story, I love the simplicity of the artwork in these, and I would thoroughly recommend anyone who hasn't read any of these Parker books to go and find it. Mr. Gretzky 1966 asked, what's the one crossover event going back as far as Death of Superman that you wish you were never sucked into? And how do I feel about big event story crossovers? Okay, the big crossover event that I wish I'd never got sucked into, but I did. And I believe I did do a video specifically about this at the time. DC's Brightest Day. We had Blackest Night, which was brilliant. Jeff Johns at his top form, and an interesting story. Of course, it crossed over with a lot of other comic books. They even introduced, the kind of next issues from defunct comic books to fit in with the crossover, but it was all so well thought out, so well written, brilliant artwork. It was the best thing at that time. And then I just think DC felt, well, we've had Blackest Night, we've got to do a Brightest Day. I can't even remember what happened here. It was just terrible, and yet I bought every single one. I think for some reason it was ultimately there to bring Alec Holland and Swamp Thing back. That's all I can think of, but they had to do it in like 30 odd issues. There were so many inconsistencies, so many still hanging story threads from this run. Obviously, I don't know whether it's been kind of retconned out of existence now since the New 52, but it was just a terrible, terrible event that meant nothing in the grand scheme of things. Now, for his second part of the question, that what do I feel about big event story crossovers now? I think we need to cut that into and point out two kind of parts of it, in the sense of the big event. I do feel there's no such thing anymore, because they're not events now. Because this happens all the time. All they are now is storylines. A big event used to happen maybe once a year, not even that, and it felt like something big was happening. Now it's like as soon as one event's finished, we're on to the next one. There's no breathing space, there's no kind of development and, you know, afterthought of what has just happened. There's no progression to the character. It's just from one storyline to the next. So I think we need to just totally cross out the idea of event comics anymore, because they're not events. They are purely a new story that just happens to, and now the next word, cross over everything going on in their respective universes. And this is my other problem, the crossover. You have your main event, which may last, you know, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 issues, but it has to have its crossovers with all its kind of like satellite titles. And if you're not reading those, you don't stand a chance. And that's pretty much what happened with the kind of last event story from Green Lantern, with the whole the lights out and the events that came after that. If you weren't reading the New Guardians, Red Lanterns, all those, you just didn't stand a chance of understanding the story. Every time I picked up a Green Lantern book, clearly something had happened and I had no clue. Again, Justice League Dark with the whole Forever Evil blight, I had so much trouble keeping up with what had happened, because that was the only book I was reading, but I knew stuff like The Phantom Stranger, Pandora in her title. They were all kind of interlinked to the story, and I just didn't have a clue because I wasn't reading them, and it harms the enjoyment of the story. So I don't like event stories, I don't like crossover stories. They're big business for the companies. They're not going to go away, and I just have to reconcile that to myself. And it's another reason why I don't pick up that many DC or Marvel books anymore, because I know eventually somewhere down the line they are going to get thrown in for whatever reason to an event story that is going on around it. Rorschach 1004 asked the question, and I'm kind of condense this because he did write quite a lot, but basically what he was asking was, do you think that superheroes should deal with real world contemporary issues or stay clear of them? Now, I have mentioned this on kind of several occasions where I've been reading my Ultimate graphic novels, and specifically Captain America. And to me, I draw the line. I say no. I'm not saying you can't deal with these issues, these kind of real life scenarios, just not in a kind of superhero environment. The two just don't fit in a comic book context. And I say a comic book context because I think it's kind of allowed within our kind of comic book movie universe. As much as we'd like to think that it's the comic book readers that are all going to these films and making them big box office smashes, it's just not the case. Otherwise we wouldn't have such small selling figures for comic books. It's the mass public that are going to watch these films, and you have to give them something they can relate to and relate to their real world, which is why a lot of this has come from 9/11, when, you know, life got serious, and it just kind of melted into all genres of media, whether it be comic books, whether it be TV, movie, just you know, the medium of information. It was always, you know, since 9/11, it changed the face of the planet and how we deal with the media in general. So I hate it. It doesn't work, just for the one basic premise that you have a superhero. You have someone like Superman who can, you know, fly so fast, lasers coming out, super strength. Why would this character not be able to stop a certain event? They have, what use are their, you know, godlike powers if they can't take down someone like Osama bin Laden? It just doesn't make sense within a comic book continuity, environment, universe, and I would love them to stay clear of that. It won't happen, but that's my take on it. Speaks asked, when did you first start getting into comics and how? Now, I'm not like the likes of Tim and Scott, who has this amazing memory. I could never tell you the first comic book I read. I have very limited, I have a short-term memory span, let's put it that way. I can vividly remember certain things and certain comic books from my past, but not in such kind of minute detail as, like I said, the like of Tim and Scott could. I do remember, obviously, as a small child, I had no recollection of American comics, but, you know, the Beano, the Dandy, Eagle, Whizzer and Chips, Whoopee, these were all kids' comic books that were a bit like, the American versions of it would be going back to kind of like the funnies. They would either be a page or 2 pages at the most of kind of crazy madcap storylines with kids involved. A little bit later on, my father used to canvass door to door for one of the political parties over here in the UK. Because I couldn't be left alone in the house on my own, I used to go with him, and I think that as a treat and to keep me shut up basically and not moan all the time, I was bought comic books, and I do vaguely remember a kind of newsagent sweet store that had one of those kind of carousels with American comic books on, and so I was allowed to pick out 2 or 3, and I do vaguely remember kind of Batman, Green Arrow, maybe Spider-Man, but it wasn't like it wasn't a comic book shop. I couldn't go back there month after month and then pick up the next issue, so when I got them it was very sporadic. I do remember, for some reason, I don't know whether it was my mum or my dad, but there was always Superman and Batman comics. So one of them used to read comic books, I don't know who. And then I kind of, as I got into my kind of early teens, I read all the kind of like the British versions, the reprints of Marvel stories like Secret Wars. They had backup stories in there of Power Pack, what else? There was Transformers, there was Thundercats, and then gradually, as I got a little bit older, there was a town near where I lived that had like it wasn't a thrift shop, it wasn't a charity shop, it was more like a vintage store, and it had lots of different stalls in there, and tucked away in a corner was a guy who sold comic books. They were all American comic books, and I started kind of delving into there, picking here and there. I had no idea what I was doing. I was just young, and I knew that comic books was something I enjoyed reading and loving. I'm sure I did a video about my history of comic books, and it's somewhere back in my video archive. Go and look for it. My comic book history is expanded on a lot better than I'm doing here.